order to actually take anything in this field of study seriously. And that would require a lot of preliminary information, which is why it was called the third school. And this, of course, shows a map of the 364 days of the year. We're talking about a lunar year. The 13 months inside of a lunar calendar. You'll see the 28 phases of the moon. And all of these have attributes and qualities attributed to them, as well as various malachim, which would be a term for angels, so on and so forth, that are also attributed to them. And it would be important to have one of these in order to navigate and make use of, or to understand the malachim and so on and so forth that a person would be presumably evoking or invoking at any given time. Now, I'm not here to encourage you guys to engage in that practice of evocation and invocation of angels. Honestly, nobody really should be involved in that type of practice. But in the field of Kabbalah, the third school comes to include all of these things, and one whose life is dedicated purely to the Kabbalah will eventually hit the precipice of having to cross the threshold of the abyss, as it were. And I happen to have find myself in that exact position. Therefore, I have began the theological mastery of the third school. So this would involve evocation and invocation of angels, and I'm pretty sure people probably have a lot of questions about what that actually refers to or means, so on and so forth, and I suppose I could give some background or understanding as to how that would actually work in theory. So to fully grasp and understand the ideas behind that, you would first have to understand a few basic things. Set these to the side. So everything principally runs according to the Sefirot, the tree of life. They are essentially the 10 emanations or lights in which God created everything with, by, and through. And these lights have attributed to them certain names of God. And these certain names of God should be understood as different attributes of the illimitable, or different attributes of the infinite one. So, with that first key, that every one of the Sefirot have a name of God, then you understand the atmos, or the essence of any particular Sefirot. The next thing one would need to understand is that every Sefirot has an angel associated to it. Once you understood the angel, and once you understood the name, you would have the next key to its component. The third thing, every single one of these, in addition, also have a planetary attribution to them. And you can see a key for that here. So you would find Chesed is associated with Saturn, and Gevurah, for example, to Jupiter, and Tiferet to Mars, etc. Now, this is going to differ drastically to what the Western esoteric systems have shown. Traditionally, they're going to show Mars to Gevurah, but those of the learned systems know that this is not the case. So, for example, in 8 times Shavagan, which is a great state for us to cite a resource for here, you guys will find here that in Yisod, which is called the Rakia, or the firmament, we're going to see Chesed is Shabtai. which is Saturn. In Gevurah it's Sedek, which is Jupiter. In Tiferes is Ma'adim, which is Mars. Again, that's going to differ from the Western occult tradition, which teaches again that Mars is associated with Gevurah, mainly because Gevurah is the color red, and Mars is called the red planet. It also has an association with Samael. Nonetheless, I digress. We learned two things from this. The first, what planet is associated to which Sphirot? And the second thing is what color is associated to not only that planet, but to that respective angel. So once you had the basic understanding of which Sphirot, which names of God, which planets and what angels, you would then apply the directions. Chesed is called negative, it means south. And Gevurah is north, and Tiferet is east, and Netzach is up, and Hod is down, and Yisod is west. So once you began to understand the directions of the Sphirot, then logically the next step would be these are connected. And so therefore evocation and invocation were done according to directions. For example, if I wanted to invoke the angel that was associated with the sphere of Chesed, or I wanted to evoke the angel that was associated with Shabtai, being Saturn, I would want to use the color blue, because Chesed is associated with the color blue. And I'd want to face the direction of the south. And so as you begin to have these theological components, you see something begins to be birthed. Call this the birth from perfect wisdom. So on the next pages here, you would then need to have an association. You would know that the 7 Sphirot are the 7 days of creation. Once you understood that there were the 7 days of creation in which the days themselves are named after these planets, for example, Saturday is Saturn Day, after the planet Saturn. Sunday is Sun Day, after the sun. Monday is Moon Day, after the moon. You would then begin to have a series of times. These times would tell us what days of the week are associated with what qualities. And so therefore, you would be able to track what angel rules over what day, and which planetary influences, or which sephirothic influences. This could further be exemplified by knowing what days are what, by associating them to the Sphirot themselves. For the 7 days of creation in Genesis are associated with the 7 Sphirot, with day 1 being the Sphere of Chesed. Afterwards, you would need to compile for yourself a chart of times. A chart of times would be the revolutions of influences, planetary influences, and astrological influences that are associated with every single day. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, by which the very first influence of any given day would be, of course, the influence that that day is associated with. So, for example, Sunday's influence would be the sun. Now, you'll notice that there's a color mechanism being employed here. This color mechanism is because if I go back to my handy-dandy key here, I'll find that Netzach is the color green, and Netzach is the attribute of the sun. If I understand that the symbol of the sun is Netzach, and the color of Netzach is green, then you will find here on the chart of times that Sunday, which is the quality of the sun, is the color green. This is what's called a table of workings. And therefore, the general idea is to capture or harness through action influences within inside of time. Malkuth itself is called time. This is time. Surrounding us are the directions, and surrounding that are various influences. The general idea behind Kabbalah Masid is to harness or capture by creating a kalim or a vessel through an action these influences and energies. You'll notice over here, there's a 7-headed serpent, because one of the terms for magic in Hebrew is nechash, which is the same word that means serpent. And the seven-headed snake, which I'm sure as you maybe have heard of from various other sources, are a symbol of those Sephirothic influences. That seven-headed snake is the root of all of those magical influences. So therefore, they are the colors blue, red, yellow, green, orange, black, and white, which are the seven Sefirot. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, and Malchut. Surrounding that are the various angels in reference to those. So, having a basic understanding of the initial keys, and we would have our table of correspondence, we would understand the names of God, we would understand the colors of the Sefirot, we would understand the days in which they would be operating in, the times, the hours, the angels, and the names of God. We could then move on to the next aspects. So going forward is a translation of a book called Sefer HaRazim. It's a very esoteric sefer that involves the evocation, invocation, and use of angels from the seven heavens. It dates back to the Talmudic period, and many date it to either right before or right after the destruction of the Second Temple. And Sefer HaRazim should not be confused with Sefer Raziel. An example, the book of the angel Raziel HaMelech is something completely different. And so here's translations of those angels, those heavens, what they do, so on and so forth. And of course, again, I don't encourage anyone to involve themselves in any of this. So I'm going to go ahead and skip forward to the next theological component of understanding in which you would need to fully incorporate these ideas. The next thing you'd have to understand is the macro and microcosmic, called the Adam Gadol and the Adam Katan. And the general idea behind this are the 22 letters of creation. Reality was created via the Hebrew language. According to the scriptures, it's written, Vayomer Elohim, Yehior Vayehior, God said, let there be light, there was light. Thus, the Lashon HaKodesh, or the Holy Tongue, or the language in which God spoke, is the language of creation. And so we actually see this. The Hebrew language is 22 letters, and is divided between 3 mother letters, 7 double letters, and 12 elemental letters. The 3 mother letters represent Aleph, Mem, and Shin. They correspond to the elements fire, air, water, and earth. That is a symbol for material reality, an example, the earth. Surrounding this are the 7 double letters, which each have 7 planetary attributions, this being a symbol of the revolution of the planets, or 7 planets surrounding the earth. And surrounding that are the 12 elemental letters, which are associated with the 12 zodiac signs. And so therefore, we find that the 22 letters of creation, or the Adam Gadol, or the macrocosmic man, is a symbol of the universe itself. And so you would need to understand that first to be able to connect with the microcosmic man within inside of yourself. This next page deals with specifically that. One thing that needs to be understood in terms of theological components are, what are magic circles? Where are magic circles from? How are they created? So on and so forth. And in order to understand that, we would need to begin with, what are the symbols that define a magic circle? So we find here are the 10 Sefirot. And what we see is that there is a single point for Keter. Why a single point? Why a single circle? Because Keter is the very first Sefirot. And as a result of that is one circle, which is unity. We see Chokmah, which is the second Sefirot, is represented by 2 lines. Bina, which is the third Sefirot, is represented by 3 lines. Chesed, being the 4th, is represented by 4 lines. Gevurah, being the 5th, by 5. Tiferet, the 6th, by 6 lines. 7 lines, 8 lines, 9 lines, and 10 lines. If a person wanted to use a magic circle, a person wanted to use a true talisman, a true kameot, they would need to understand this bit of information first. You would need to use the respective seal to invoke or evoke the angel and the name of God, the direction, the color, and the time, all associated with these matters. Here is a chart of doing that. The microcosmic man, being the self, would then have to utilize a series of evocations and invocations. It is written, man is a tree. The body is a tree. And so you would have to invoke Kether, because Kether is the head, above the head, and Chokmah, and Bina, and Chesed, and Gevurah, and Tifras, and Netzach, Hod, and Yisod, and Malchut, uniting your body as the microcosmic individual with the macrocosmic Adam Kadmon. And this is for the purpose of evocation and invocation. Now, I'm not going to go into the specific details of how one might attain the process of doing that, but it is explained here. Going back to the magic circles, right? So we now have the components. We have planetary attributions, angels, names of God, colors, directions, times, and now we have sacred geometric seals and symbols. Every amulet is formed inside of a circle. The circle is the attribute of Kether. And so therefore, the idea is drawing something outside of Kether. So we're drawing an attribute from Kether. This is the first idea. So I'll give you an example of what that would look like. So here, for example, is the sun. And this is invocations and evocations for the Melach, Raphael, the angel known as Raphael. In order to discover the seal of the angel Raphael, we would need access to a few keys. There's a very esoteric book called The Kabbalah of the Prophets, called Aven HaShohem. It was attributed to Eliyahu Hanavi. It was originally in a manuscript form, as you can see, but nonetheless, it was later published. And you can see here, there's these little magical inscriptions, these markings here. We don't actually know what those are. The book doesn't exactly explain what those symbols are, but I'm going to reveal them to you. The entire book has to deal with magical squares. And so here would be a magical square of the sun. The original book does not have any of this red writing inside of it. This is my own writing. We would see here the seal for Raphael. This is the marking for Raphael. And when you place this seal inside of the square of the sun, because Raphael is the angel of the sun, we find that the numerical value of all of these numbers equals Raphael. Right? So with that key bit of information, which I've reproduced here, you could then create the circle, right? So then what would the circle be? Well, if I'm dealing with the sun, let's go back to our first key. We go back into our first key and find the sun. We find the sun is Netzach, and Netzach is the color green. This is associated with the angel Raphael, which I can further confirm here. Okay? Ruling over Sunday, or the day of the sun, Raphael, and the color is green. Next, I would then check this chart for seals. I would find that the 7-pointed star is over Netzach. Netzach being the sun and being the angel Raphael, its color being green. I would then place the seal of Raphael, which was formed from the planetary square of the sun, whose value is Raphael.
Thank you for the gifts, guys.
Into the center of a circle. Again, I said the circle was Kether. You're drawing the attributes out of Kether. The color is green because that's the color of Netzach, the color attributed to the sun. And in the middle of it is the seal for the angel Raphael. Now, ideally, if I was doing evocation and invocation, I would have on the front side, the seal, And on the back side, I would have the square. And I have a small example of that. Maybe I'll provide an example of that. So for example, I have here the angel of Tiferet. So Tiferet is associated with Ma'adim. Tiferet is associated with Ma'adim. So let's go back to our chart and we'll see what that is. Ma'adim means Mars. So we find Tiferet is Mars. And this is attributed to the color yellow. Then I would consult my chart. I would find that this is the 6-pointed star, and therefore I would be using this seal for the magical amulet or invocation tool. I would check for the magical square. In this case, I would consort Aven HaShochem. And again, the secrets of the angels are not revealed themselves in Aven HaShochem. So even if you have a copy of this book, it does not tell you how these magical seals were formed. Nonetheless, you can see it right here. The original manuscript, you can see the symbol. It was not explained what to do or how to get this. But if you take this symbol and place it in example, the square of the planet Mars, which is what this is, the numerical value of all of these numbers is Samael. Samael is the angel over Mars. So you would have the 6-pointed star in the circle, which corresponds to Keter, in the color yellow. On the day and time of Mars, the seal, and on the back side of it, you would have the square. Next, you would need to understand the basics of what exactly is a magic circle, why would you place them into it, so on and so forth. So, traditionally in high ceremonial magic, you would be inside of a magic circle. Many people have probably seen the picture of the magus inside of the magic circle. The magic circle is a seal of protection. It's meant to protect the individual. But what is the theological thinking behind that? How do we understand what a magic circle is and what good could it possibly be? So to understand those components, here's a magic circle. You will find that in the middle of it is the Star of David, the Magen David. One, because it corresponds to the sphere of Tiferet, which is called Adam, or man. Two, because you are standing in the middle of the Logos. You're standing in the middle of the Word. You will find here that the 22 Hebrew letters are actually formed by the Star of David. Okay? So when you're standing in the middle of the Star of David, you're standing in the middle of the Word. And when you're seeking to utilize the powers of creation, there is no more powerful a symbol you could possibly have or use than the seal by which the 22 letters themselves are to be found. So don't look at it as in you're standing in the middle of a Star of David. You should understand it, you're standing in the middle of the Logos. You're standing in the middle of the Word, of the letters of God, the powers of creation. And standing in the midst of it, you're evoking and invoking the powers of creation, commanding as God does these things. And this is what is written, to walk in the ways of Hashem. To walk in the ways of God means literally, mamash, quite literally. As it is written, he makes the wind his messengers, and the angels were originally messengers of God, but they were also our servants, the servants of human beings. After the man's fall, we became underneath angels, but before that it was not so. This is what is written, man is to be ruler over the birds of the air. This refers to the angels, of course. So you'll see here a list of evocation and invocation practices regarding each of the melachs and angels associated with the various planets and seals and symbols. As you can see, this, of course, is the planet Mars. We revealed what the seal of Samael is for Mars. We also discussed the color and use for it?
He made this book. Yes, this is all his drawing and illustrating. Yes.
So I'd like to redirect you guys' attention really quickly to a book called Foel Nephiloth. Some people have attributed this book to either the Baal Shem Tov, some people say a disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. Nonetheless, it is, without question, a work of practical magic. People don't think that it exists in Judaism, but it does. This particular book, of course, came from Jerusalem. You could possibly find copies of it online. But you can see evocations and invocations all over the place, including magical scripts, so on and so forth, circles, because the angels have different magical scripts, right? The Archangel Michael, the Archangel Gabriel, Metatron, so on and so forth. But going to the beginning of this, I want to show you guys something interesting here. So when we look at the list for angels here, we see that he lists off, this is the Hebrew word for Samael, we see that he lists off Samael as this strange marking. What is this strange marking, and how do we actually get to this marking? How did they draw this out? Obviously, these are deeply rooted in the highest and most eternal mysteries, and it's easily confused. A person could just flagellate them and just say they're made up by some schizophrenic drunkard, or they could actually be seated in the most eternal wisdom, and indeed it is. So again, I'll go to another book. This is another book that I've written on the subject. It's a tome, as you guys can see here, and it's all on the workings of the third school. And I'll open up with the portraits, so on and so forth. So we're just going to go into the planet Mars.
And thank you guys for the gifts and follows.
What we're looking for here. Okay, so here's the planet Mars. So we already discussed how we obtained this symbol, which we saw inside of our book Ben HaShochem regarding Samael. But I want us to avert our attention to this symbol. So we see this symbol here, which is a symbol for Samael. Now, if we place that symbol inside of the same square, which is a square of Mars, as you can see here, okay, the numerical value of each of these, again, is Samael, exactly Samael. So the seal being used here in Qliphoth didn't just come out of an ether, it didn't just come out of chaos or madness. It came by perfect wisdom, because they were using the planetary square of Mars, knowing that the angel Samael is the Melech over this planet. And they found the seals in the planetary square, which none of this is recorded anywhere. But we see evidence of it here. So this alternative marking could also be used for the angel Samael. So I'll divert your guys' attention away from there for one last thing, I suppose, and then we'll probably conclude it here.
Layla, he's just showing like a brief example of magic, not really diving into the deeper details of that.
Yeah. I certainly do have the keys to the Royal Arcana, but I only dispensate that mouth to ear amongst very, very learned individuals, because it's a sacred art, sacred science. It's written that Torah is only maintained by he who's willing to die for it, and unless a person's entire life is dedicated to the subject, it is not permitted to divulge the real secrets. Although what I'm revealing already is pushing the limit of what should be said. This is a final sefer here. It's another manuscript. You can see it's written in Hebrew, in shorthand, unfortunately, so it's very difficult to read. And you will see again magical circles, evocations and invocations. And you'll see a listing of seals of angels. You probably will have seen these because McGregor Mathers decided to incorporate them in his Golden Dawn system. but they have much older roots than that. And so you can see them listed here. Now that I have these charts, you then would need to create the next system. You would need a map of the heavens. And so you can see here that map. If you look closely, we'll find, for example, here is Samael. And we will see the seal for Samael that we just saw in the Hebrew tome, or that Hebrew Sefer, which were on the Keys of Solomon, interestingly enough, which differs drastically from the Keys of Solomon that you guys have access to here in the English-speaking world. And you see the word Ma'adim, which is Mars. And here you see that exact planetary square, that exact planetary influence, that seal for the angel. So these magical seals, glyphs, colors, attributions, so on and so forth, are actually birthed from perfect wisdom. And you can find how high ceremonial magic came into existence. It came into existence by perfect wisdom, through the perfect theological understandings of the workings of creation. It was a byproduct, like a child birthed from its wisdom. So you would then need this chart in order to plan workings. And just as there is on the side of Kedusha, which this would be dealing with the side of holiness, the 28 moon phases again aligning with the 28 times in Ecclesiastes, there is the level of the Sita Akra.
And in regards to where do you get all these things, he makes them. All the books and scrolls that you're seeing, he hand makes them.
Yes, the wisdom, real wisdom like this is lost. It's lost. And the keys to those mysteries are only passed down amongst real masters. And there are no real masters. Well, at least there are, but not on the internet. There's no real masters of the supreme wisdom on the internet. But there are remnants in the world, I'll promise you that. And these types of keys have been highly guarded and kept away from the profane. One, to prevent them from being misused. And two, because they would draw your attention away from the worship of God, right? These things are theurgical in nature. They're meant for those that walk with God, that walk a holy path. They're not meant to be for those who are without God and just seek power.
Someone asked, where did you learn these things?
That's a great question. So I have access to what some people would call the supernal Mount A. Other people would call it the heavenly yeshivot, the schools behind the veil. Not here, right? There are many dimensions to existence. This is just one dimension, and there's a dimension above this one and above that one. And you can see this, for example, like imagine a cow in your mind. But there could be a cow in reality. Or you could be looking at a cow. There's a version of the cow here in this dimension, but there's a version of the cow existing in your mind, which is another dimension. And there are dimensions above that. So in order to access the supreme wisdom, everything must come through the Torah. And one who knows the ways of the Torah can find their way into the house of the Father, where there are many palaces and many chambers and supernal mysteries, the knowledge of God. If a person finds their way inside of there in perfected wisdom, having no strange God with them, but Hashem alone leads them, they too can learn these mysteries. And I would recognize one because they would know the same mysteries, because these mysteries are founded in perfect wisdom. As I said, they too would know the seals of Samael, or the seals of Raphael, or Gabriel, or Michael, because of perfect wisdom.
People are asking, how can they learn this?
How can they learn this? So I have taken it upon myself to contemplate very carefully about beginning to teach it openly, because, well, maybe not all of its mechanics, but at least the theological components, the first aspect of it, because there's a lot of nonsense that exists right now in terms of Western esoteric traditions, occult traditions, chaos magic, and all of this nonsense, which is just convoluted, diluted, and culturally appropriated garbage. But it causes a lot of people to go astray. And it's one of the reasons why I began doing TikToks in the first place, because there's no real authorities on the subject, and there really should be. A lot of people that are engaged in the study of Torah and the study of Kabbalah are afraid to pass that threshold. And the very fact they have that fear to pass that threshold tells us they should not be studying it. But nonetheless, it is time that Da'as fills the world, and therefore it is imperative that I start to reveal and revelate these matters. So just as there is a side of holiness, there is a side of the Sita Akra, unholiness, and this will be the last thing I'll show. On the side of unholiness, there are 7 levels to Gehinnom or Sheol, which are called hell. And there is a tree called the Eitz Hamavos, the tree of death. On the tree of death are the 11 Qliphoth, or the 11 powers of the Sita Akra, the demonic hierarchy, the infernal, the worlds. And they too also have supernal mysteries and secrets. They have chambers, so on and so forth. And this is the secret of the verse: He created the one as well as the other.
Someone asked repeatedly, what is the spear of destiny?
The what?
The spear of destiny.
So, I'm Jewish, I'm not Christian, but the spear of destiny is the spear that presumably pierced the side of Jesus and caused his death. It was infused with his blood, and so became divine. They believed that the person who held this spear would have the ability to overcome their enemies. It was held by certain Roman emperors who used it as a symbol of prestige to conquer, and was highly sought after by Hitler and others who sought world domination.
There you go. If you guys want to learn more, he has a YouTube channel in his link tree, and the name of his YouTube channel is Restoration of the Breach, where he goes heavy into the deepest magical and scholarly mysteries of this generation.
Thank you. This is the tree of the Sita Akra, dealing with the tree of death. And this would be a chart, completely unsealed. I'm not going to go into its mysteries again, not to empower those who shouldn't be, but I have a YouTube video, and my most recent YouTube video goes into some of the dichotomies and mechanics and the essence of what's being discussed here. So, but you would need one as well as the other. Regarding this, it is written, have the gates of death, or the gates of the shadow of death, been opened to you? And this is said in Job chapter 38, verse 17. So I'll go back over here. Like the spear of destiny, there are also some things like reliquaries, which contain relics inside of them, and many other different strange things like that. So I will get ready to bring it to a conclusion. I hope that you guys were able to have a brief understanding behind the theological components of what birthed the third school, where high ceremonial magic came from. You can see behind, if you carefully analyze the things that are said in this live, the roots of all Western esotericism, at least in the practical levels. And in the future, they say, the Zohar tells us that in the future, not only will this art be restored, but we will actually come to worship God through it.
People want to know, when do you go live?
I am still trying to figure that part out, but perhaps I will start going live on Thursdays. This is a Thursday. Perhaps I will start going live on Thursday, and I will work on trying to have a consistent schedule. One thing I would just caution is, if someone is talking about magic, or someone is talking about angels or Kabbalah or anything like that, they should have works. You should see tomes, you should see ilanot, scrolls. They should really be a master of their craft. It's a very advanced subject. And anybody can say anything. Anyone can say, I'm a Kabbalist, I know this, I know that. from a Jewish perspective, it's written, a sage is preferred over a prophet. When someone says they're a Kabbalist, it's like saying you can make the prophet Isaiah. It's an absurdity. It's an absurdity. And yet this term Kabbalist is used really loosely. Really loosely. It's a very holy science, a very holy subject that requires a lifetime of dedication and study strictly to it. And as you can see, the amount of scholarship, these are just 2 or 3, I suppose, I've shown of tomes. And you can see the size of these tomes and the stuff that's written inside of them. That being said, it's spiritually dangerous to just listen to people as authorities on the subject. You should see paperwork first. Check to see their works. You know a tree by the nature of its fruit. What kind of fruit is it producing? If it's not producing the right fruit, take what they say with a grain of salt, even if it is true. Okay, you guys. Many blessings, and I hope to see you guys again.
Thank you guys for all the likes and follows. Have a good night. We'll see you Thursday.